Hey guys, tonight we're going to slip quietly into another corner of the world. One that's far away from glowing screens, endless notifications, and the hum of your to-do list. Imagine for a moment that you're not sitting where you are right now, but instead, you're standing at the edge of a small mountain path in Japan, centuries ago. The air is cool and sweet, carrying the scent of pine needles and wood smoke. Somewhere in the distance, a slow wooden bell echoes through the hills. You feel the gravel under your feet. You hear the faint rush of a nearby stream. There's no rush here. Time feels like it's decided to take a nap. And just before we step fully into tonight's journey, I'd love to know, where are you listening from right now and what time is it for you? Drop it in the comments. It's always fascinating to see how our little circle of quiet spans across cities, countries, and time zones. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you can join me next time without searching. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's take that first slow step together into tonight's story. The path curves gently ahead, flanked by old cherry trees whose blossoms fall like pale pink snow. You hear the soft crunch of your steps on the dirt, the occasional rustle of a bird shifting in the branches above. The morning air feels cool against your skin. Cool in that way that wakes you up just enough to notice how alive everything is. Around the bend, you see it. A small house with a thatched roof. Paper lanterns swaying gently by the door. In the garden, a man kneels among bright green shoots, his hands deep in the soil. This is Hakuin, a Zen master, whose wisdom is whispered about far beyond this little village. His eyes crinkle warmly as he speaks to the children gathered around him, their laughter rising and falling like wind through leaves. It's the kind of scene you'd expect to find in a painting, simple, warm, untouched by drama. But drama has a way of arriving even where it's least invited. Weeks pass and you find yourself woven into the quiet rhythm of this place, until one afternoon, you notice something unusual, a hush in the air, followed by sharp whispers at the village well. A young woman, the daughter of a wealthy family, is pregnant. No one knows who the father is until she speaks. Under pressure from her parents, she names Hakuin. The next morning, the garden feels different. You hear raised voices before you even step through the gate. The young woman's parents stand before Hakuin, their faces rigid with anger. Her father's voice cuts through the peaceful air. You have brought shame upon our daughter and our family. Everyone thinks you're so virtuous. But now we know the truth. Your stomach tightens. You expect him to protest, to defend himself, to fight the accusation. Instead, Hakuin simply looks at them, his gaze calm, his breath steady. When they finally fall silent, he says 3 quiet words. Is that so? No defense. No explanation, no denial. The parents leave furious at what they think is his indifference, vowing to tell the entire village. And they do. By the end of the week, people who once greeted Hakuin with respect now cross the road to avoid him. The children no longer come to his garden. Even the air seems to have grown heavier. And yet, nothing in his routine changes. He meditates in the pale morning light. He tends his vegetables. He fetches water from the well. And whenever someone throws an insult his way or whispers just loud enough for him to hear, he gives the same 3 words, "Is that so?" Months pass. The seasons shift. One winter morning, snow falls in thick, silent flakes. There's a knock at Hakuin's door. The young woman's parents stand there, holding a small bundle wrapped in cloth. The baby has been born. "You are the father," they tell him. "You must take care of your child." They place the infant in his arms and walk away. Hakuin looks down at the tiny face, the dark eyes blinking up at him. "Is that so?" he murmurs. And just like that, he begins raising the child. You watch him weave a cradle from a basket line it with soft cloth. You follow as he visits neighbors for milk, learning how to soothe colic and rock a baby to sleep. Nights once filled with quiet meditation are now filled with soft lullabies under the moonlight. When the child smiles for the first time, Hakuin smiles back, the corners of his eyes deepening like ripples in a pond. A year passes. Spring returns carrying the scent of cherry blossoms again. One morning, you see the young woman and her parents approaching the garden. Their faces are different now, drawn with shame instead of anger. They bow deeply. "Our daughter has confessed," the father says. "You are not the father. The man is from the fish market. We have wronged you deeply." The mother steps forward. "We have come to take the child back, and we will tell the whole village the truth." Hakuin listens, his face unchanged. He gently hands the child to the grandparents. And with the same calm tone he's used all along, he says, "Is that so?" You stand there feeling something shift inside you. The words aren't cold. They aren't resignation. They're freedom. A freedom that comes from not needing to defend or explain or control what is beyond your control. Later, as the blossoms drift to the ground, you think about how you might have reacted. Anger, bitterness, maybe even a desperate clinging to the child. But Hakuin, he met each moment exactly as it came, neither grasping at joy nor resisting pain. And that's the thing about Is That So? It's not about indifference. It's about meeting reality without armor, without needing it to be different before you can be at peace. You wonder in your own life, where could you try saying those words when someone criticizes you unfairly? When plans fall apart? When the story you thought you were living suddenly changes? Could you even for a moment meet it with "Is that so?" and see what happens? The snow melts, the blossoms fall, and the path, as always, keeps curving gently ahead. But not every lesson in Zen arrives wrapped in scandal or public judgment. Sometimes it comes in something so small, you might pour it out without a thought. In our next story, a young monk learns the value of an entire universe inside a single drop of water. The courtyard is quiet this morning, except for the rhythmic sweep of a bamboo broom against smooth stone. The air smells faintly of pine and damp earth from the night's rain. You see him there, a young monk named Taesui, methodically brushing away fallen leaves. His robe is neat, his posture disciplined. The kind of quiet diligence that tells you he's been here long enough to know the daily rhythm, but not long enough to stop feeling the need to prove himself. When the last leaf is gone, Taesui leans the broom against the wall. An older monk approaches a figure whose presence makes you straighten your own back without thinking. This is Master Nissan, known throughout the region for his wisdom and for his strictness. Taesui Nissan says, his voice clear in the morning stillness, "Bring me a pail of water to cool my bath." Taesui bows deeply and hurries to the well. The rope slides through his hands until you hear the soft splash far below. He hauls up the bucket water, sloshing against the wooden sides, and carries it carefully to where Nissan waits beside a steaming wooden tub. The steam rises in curls as Taesui pours the water in. When the bath is cool enough, he sets the bucket aside. There's still a little water left at the bottom, just enough to wet your hands, maybe rinse a cloth. Without much thought, Taesui tilts the bucket toward the ground. "Stop!" Nissan's voice cuts the air like a blade. Taesui freezes the bucket suspended midair. "Why didn't you give the rest of the water to the plants?" Nissan asks, his tone firm but not cruel. "What right have you to waste even a drop of water in this temple?" The courtyard falls silent. Even the birds seem to pause. Taesui feels heat rising in his face. He opens his mouth to explain. It's not much water. It doesn't matter, but something in Nissan's eyes stops him. Instead, he straightens, turns, and walks to the herb garden along the wall. He kneels and pours the last of the water at the roots of the smallest plants, watching the soil darken as it drinks. When he's done, he returns and bows. "I understand now, Master," he says quietly. Nissan gives a single nod and steps into the bath as though nothing remarkable has happened. But you can feel it. Something has happened. Something more than a lesson in gardening. Over the next days, you notice Taesui moving differently. When he helps prepare the midday meal, every grain of rice is handled with care. When he washes bowls, he uses exactly the water he needs, no more, no less. Even his steps on the stone path seem deliberate, like each one matters. A fellow monk asks him why. Taesui smiles. "Today I learned that nothing is just a drop of water. In that drop is the entire universe." How we treat the smallest things reflects how we understand the largest things. Years later, when Taesui becomes a master himself, he will change his name to mean a drop of water. That morning in the courtyard will become the foundation of his teaching, a reminder that enlightenment often hides in the most ordinary acts. Think about the drops of water in your own life, the little moments, resources, and opportunities you might be overlooking, the leftover food you scrape away, the last few minutes before you fall asleep, the brief glance you give to someone passing by. These moments aren't small. They are the practice. If a line from this story resonates with you, share it in the comments below. I'd love to know what your drop of water is today. In Zen, awareness isn't reserved for meditation cushions or incense-filled halls. It's in how you fold your clothes, how you speak to a stranger, how you handle what's left at the bottom of the bucket. To waste carelessly watertime energy is to misunderstand how deeply everything is connected. The drop comes from somewhere. It goes somewhere. Nothing exists in isolation. Tesui's story reminds you that it's not about grand gestures of mindfulness. It's about full presence, even in the smallest acts. The drop you save the second you notice, the smile you offer, they ripple outward in ways you can't always see. That morning in the courtyard fades from view. The scent of wet earth drifts away, and you find yourself back on the path again, the air shifting as the day moves forward. Some lessons arrive in the freshness of morning. Others come at the edge of life itself in the quiet hours when breath is slowing and the body begins to let go. In the next story, a master writes to his dying student not with promises, but with a truth that melts fear like snow in the pure air. The air is sharp this morning, the kind that makes every sound travel farther. You hear the crunch of gravel under the feet of a lone messenger, making his way up the mountain path. His robe flaps lightly in the wind. Ahead, a small hermitage sits on a hillside overlooking a valley draped in mist. This is where Master Basui lives, thin as a wind-shaped pine, his presence both gentle and unshakable. He is known for speaking plainly, without decoration but with a depth that cuts straight to the heart. The messenger bows low before him. Master, I bring word from your disciple Iguchi. He is gravely ill. He believes he will not recover. He begs for your final teaching to guide him through this transition. Basui's eyes close briefly. You can almost see the weight of compassion settle on him, not as a burden but as an honoring of the moment. He nods once, motions for paper, inkstone and brush. There is a kind of ceremony in the way he prepares. Grinding the ink slowly, he seems to let each stroke of the stone settle his breath. It's as if the act of preparation is already part of the teaching. When the ink is ready, he sits for a moment, the brush hovering over the blank page. Then with a fluid motion, he begins to write. You can't see the characters from where you stand, but you can feel it. This is not a letter of comfort in the usual sense. This is something more direct. By the time the ink is dry, the letter is rolled, sealed, and placed in the messenger's hands. Travel swiftly, Basui says. Iguchi's time is short. That evening, Basui gathers his disciples. Today, he says, I wrote to Iguchi, who stands at the threshold between this life and whatever lies beyond. You too should consider what I shared with him. For none of us knows when we will face our final breath. And then he speaks the essence of his letter aloud. The essence of your mind is not born, so it will never die. It is not an existence that can be destroyed, nor an emptiness that is merely void. It has no color, no form. It enjoys no pleasures and suffers no pains. Covet nothing. Your end, which is endless, is as a snowflake dissolving in the pure air. You feel the words settle in the air like falling snow. No rush, no urgency. Just a stillness that seems to open the room. The next morning, news arrives Iguchi passed during the night. Those present said his breathing had grown slow, easy. A faint smile rested on his lips as if he had stepped into a warm room from the cold. Think about your own relationship with endings. Not just death, the endings that come in quieter ways. A friendship, fading a chapter of life, closing the last day in a place you once called home. If there's a part of this teaching that stays with you, share it in the comments. Which words feel like snow melting into your own life? Basui's teaching does not offer escape from impermanence. It invites you to look right into it. To see that beneath the constant shifting of forms, birth change loss, there is something untouched, not separate from you. We live so much of our lives protecting this constructed self, guarding it against insult, loss, or change. But what Basui points to is not that self. It's the awareness that watches, the stillness beneath the waves. Imagine holding a snowflake in your hand. You can't keep it. You can't freeze that moment without losing its delicate beauty. The only way to know it fully is to let it melt, to feel it vanish and know that nothing essential was lost. That is what he offered Iguchi. Not the promise of continuation in the way we usually imagine, but a recognition that what is most real cannot end. The fire in the small hearth has burned down to embers now. Outside, the snow continues to fall, muffling every sound. The world feels quieter, as though it's leaning in to listen. And sometimes, the truth we seek doesn't arrive in stillness at all. Sometimes, it comes in a way that makes the whole village stop and stare in the form of a judge, a theft, and the most unlikely arrest you could imagine. The market is alive today. Baskets of persimmons stacked high, the air thick with the smell of grilled fish, merchants calling out prices. With the rhythm of a song they've sung 1,000 times. But beyond the chatter and the clink of coins, something feels off. You can sense it in the way people glance over their shoulders, in the way conversations trail off when a certain topic comes too close. It doesn't take long to hear the whispers, someone has stolen gold from the temple. The villagers are shocked. Not just because theft is rare here, but because the gold wasn't coins. It was the thin sheets of gold leaf that covered the temple's most sacred statue, a stone Buddha older than anyone can remember. At the center of the square stands Judge Uka, a man known for solving disputes with a mix of law and unusual creativity. His robes are impeccable, but his eyes are bright, almost playful, like he's already 10 moves ahead in a game only he can see. He listens to the temple keeper describe the theft, nodding slowly. Then, without asking another question, he says, "Bring me the statue of the Buddha. We will arrest him for this crime." The crowd gasps. Even the wind seems to pause. Arrest the Buddha. But Uka's tone is calm, matter of fact, as though this is the most logical next step. Within the hour, 4 men arrive carrying the massive stone figure, setting it gently in the middle of the market. Ropes are tied loosely around it, and Uka stands before the villagers. This Buddha, he declares, failed to guard the temple's treasure. Until the gold is returned, he will remain under watch. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Some shake their heads, others stifle laughter, and somewhere among them a pair of eyes watches too closely. Eyes that belong to the thief. By the next morning, word of the arrested Buddha has spread far beyond the village. People from nearby towns arrive to see the spectacle, the serene stone face sitting in the middle of the market, roped like a criminal, surrounded by curious onlookers. The thief blends in with the crowd at first, enjoying the absurdity of it all. But as the day goes on, something shifts. He hears the merchants gossiping about how the Buddha is being humiliated. He sees children pointing and asking why the sacred statue has been tied up like an animal. And then he notices Judge Uka, who never seems to stop watching not just the statue, but the faces of the people who pass by. By sunset, the thief can't stand it any longer. He slips through the crowd, approaches the judge, and bows. "It was me," he says, voice low. "I took the gold. I'll return it all tonight. Please, let the Buddha go." Uka's eyes soften and a small smile tugs at his lips. "Very well," he says. "But remember, you didn't just steal gold. You tried to take from something beyond value, the trust of your community. Think about how you've seen justice handled in your own life. Is it always about punishment, or can it also be about creating a moment so unexpected, so undeniable, that it pulls the truth out into the open?" If this story sparked a thought, share it in the comments. Have you ever seen a problem solved in a way that surprised everyone? The next morning, the statue is carried back to the temple, its gold leaf restored. The villagers gather in the courtyard, relieved and amused all at once. They bow before the Buddha, whose face, of course, has not changed at all. Still serene, still unmoved by accusation or release. Judge Uka walks away without ceremony. For him, the case is closed. But for you, there's something to carry forward, a reminder that sometimes the straight path to truth is the least effective one. A twist, a bit of absurdity can disarm defenses and reveal what force alone never could. And perhaps in its own way, that's a kind of compassion. Seeing the humanity in someone enough to create a way back for them, rather than only a way down. The market slowly returns to its usual rhythm. The smell of fish and persimmons drifts back into the air. But now, every time you pass the temple and see the Buddha sitting peacefully inside you, can't help but remember the day he was arrested and freed. Of course, not all acts of devotion are so public. Some happen in quiet corners away from the eyes of the crowd, and sometimes they take a form so strange you might not recognize it as devotion at all. In our next story, a villager's strange act turns the nose of the Buddha black and saves him in the process. The temple courtyard is unusually still today. No monks sweeping the path. No visitors leaving offerings. Only the sound of a breeze moving lazily through the cedars. You step inside the main hall and see it, the great Buddha statue carved from stone sitting cross-legged on its pedestal. Its face is serene eyes, half-closed lips, curved in the faintest suggestion of a smile. But something is different. The nose. It's pitch black. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light paint. Thick, dark paint as if someone had taken a brush in the middle of the night and coated the statue's nose in ink. The abbot stands before it, arms crossed. Beside him, a handful of monks whisper among themselves. Some are angry. Some just look confused. By midday, word has spread through the village. People gather at the temple gate, peeking inside to catch a glimpse. Who would deface the most sacred object in the region? That evening, the culprit steps forward, not a rebellious monk, not a drunken youth, but an elderly villager named Sobe. His clothes are simple, worn from years in the fields, and he bows low before the abbot. "I am the one who painted the Buddha's nose," he says, voice steady. The abbot's eyes narrow. "Why do you have no respect for what is holy?" Sobe raises his head. "I do, more than you know. That's why I did it." The hall falls silent. Sobe explains word had reached the village that a wealthy merchant from the city was planning to buy the statue, paying such a sum that the temple could not refuse. "I knew," Sobe says, "that once he saw the Buddha's nose like this, he would not want it, and our Buddha would remain where he belongs." The abbot studies him for a long moment. "You would disfigure the Buddha to protect him." "Yes," Sobe says, "because this Buddha is not gold or silver. He belongs to the people here, to the prayers whispered before dawn, to the children who learn to bow. I would rather see him with a black nose than see him taken away." It's tempting to think that devotion always looks neat, clean, reverent in a way that everyone recognizes. But sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it looks wrong to those who don't see the bigger picture. If you've ever had to protect something in a way others didn't understand, share it in the comments. I'd like to hear your story. The merchant arrives a week later. He walks into the temple hall, takes one look at the Buddha's face and frowns. "The craftsmanship is exquisite," he says. "But that nose, what happened?" The abbot only shrugs. "It is as you see." The merchant shakes his head. "I have no interest in flawed things." And just like that, he turns and leaves. When the doors close behind him, the abbot looks at Sobe. For the first time, there's a flicker of a smile. "The Buddha remains," he says quietly. Over the following days, the black paint wears away under the touch of wind and rain. Slowly, the nose returns to its original color, as if nothing had ever happened. But for those who know the story, the Buddha will never look quite the same again. Every time they bow, they see not just a statue, but the devotion of a man willing to risk being misunderstood to keep something sacred where it belongs. You leave the hall and step back into the courtyard. The cedars sway gently, their shadows stretching across the stone path. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings, soft, resonant, like a reminder that what's truly valuable can't always be polished and perfect. And sometimes the most perfect teaching doesn't come in words at all. Sometimes it's as simple as a hand holding a flower, and a single smile that changes the course of history. The lake is still this morning, so still it looks like polished glass. Mist clings low over the water, curling around the reeds, while the rising sun paints the surface in shades of pale gold. A wooden boat drifts toward the shore. Standing in it is the Buddha robes the color of early autumn leaves moving, with the calm certainty of someone who has nowhere else to be. Disciples and villagers wait on the bank, a semicircle of quiet anticipation. Today is special. They expect words, perhaps a discourse on compassion or a story that will illuminate the mind like a lantern in the dark. The Buddha steps onto the shore without a sound. He walks slowly to a flat stone, folds his legs beneath him, and rests his hands in his lap. The crowd leans forward. Instead of speaking, he reaches into the shallow water beside the stone and plucks a single lotus flower. Its petals are perfect, untouched by the mud from which it rose. He holds it up, letting the morning light catch on its dewdrops. Silence. The disciples wait. The villagers wait. Seconds stretch into minutes. Still, no words. Just the Buddha, the flower, and the sound of a heron taking flight somewhere far across the lake. One by one, the people shift uncomfortably. A few glance at each other as if to say, "Is this it?" Even the most devoted begin to wonder if perhaps they are missing something. And then, one man smiles. It is Mahakashyapa, a disciple known for his quiet insight. His smile is small but unmistakable, like a man who has just recognized a friend he's been searching for all his life. The Buddha sees it. Their eyes meet. And in that moment, without a single syllable spoken, something is transmitted. Not knowledge, not belief. Something deeper beyond words, beyond thought. When was the last time you understood something without it being explained? A look, a gesture, the way the air felt before a storm. If this story reminded you of a moment like that, tell me about it in the comments. Sometimes the most profound connections can't be written down. They have to be shared in silence. Later, the Buddha will say only this: I have the true Dharma, I, the wondrous mind of Nirvana, the reality beyond form. I entrust it now to Mahakashyapa. That single act, the raising of a flower, will mark the beginning of Zen's tradition of direct transmission, passing understanding from mind to mind without relying on scripture or doctrine. It's not that words are unimportant, but there are truths that language can only point to, like a finger toward the moon. The danger is mistaking the finger for the moon itself. As the crowd disperses, you walk away along the lake path. The sunlight glitters on the water. You find yourself wondering how many moments in your own life have been flowers you didn't notice. Little offerings of understanding that you dismissed. Because they came without explanation, maybe the next time silence stretches out, you'll resist the urge to fill it. Maybe you'll just hold the flower a little longer. The heron calls again in the distance. The boat drifts back into the mist. and the lotus now set gently on the stone rests, as if it has been there forever. But not every teaching comes wrapped in silence. Sometimes it arrives as a knock at the door and a name written on a calling card that tells you exactly who you're dealing with, or so you think. It's late afternoon, the kind of hour when the sun hangs low and turns everything gold. The rooftops, the dusty street, even the paper lanterns swaying gently outside shop doors. The air smells faintly of roasted tea leaves and wood smoke. You're sitting in the reception hall of a modest Zen temple, the kind with weathered steps and a garden that hums quietly with cicadas. The master here, Gasan, is known for his straightforward manner, a way of speaking that's both gentle and impossible to ignore. A knock at the temple gate breaks the stillness. A young monk answers, then returns with a small stiff rectangle of card. He presents it to Gasan with both hands. On it is written, Governor of Kyoto Kitagaki. The title gleams like a badge. You can feel the room shift ever so slightly, the way people react when someone important is about to walk in. But Gasan only glances at the card, then shakes his head. Tell him I have nothing to say to a governor. The monk looks startled, but obeys, stepping outside to deliver the message. A few moments later, there's another knock. The card is presented again. This time, the title has been crossed out. It simply reads Kitagaki. Gasan nods. Show him in. When Kitagaki enters, he bows deeply. He's dressed in fine but understated robes, the kind of clothing that lets you know he could command attention if he wanted to. But right now, he's chosen humility. They sit together in the small hall and Gasan pours tea. No guards, no ceremony. Just two men sharing the same quiet space. You would not see me when I came as the governor. Kitagaki says, a hint of amusement in his voice. That's because I am not interested in speaking to titles, Gasan replies. I am interested in speaking to people. Think about how often we meet the role instead of the person, the job title, the social media profile, the assumptions we make based on what's printed on the metaphorical calling card. If this story makes you think of a time you saw past someone's title or wished they'd seen past yours, share it in the comments. The conversation drifts easily from politics to philosophy, from the price of rice in the markets to the impermanence of all things. Kitagaki laughs more than once, his posture loosening as the teapot slowly empties. Before leaving, he bows again. I came as the governor and was turned away. I came as myself and was welcomed. I will remember this. Gasan's gaze is steady. Remember also that one day the title will fall away whether you choose it or not. When that day comes, be ready to meet the world as you, not as what was printed on a card. The late light spills into the courtyard as Kitagaki departs. The air feels lighter somehow, as though a layer of formality has been peeled away. You watch him walk down the temple path, the sound of his footsteps fading into the quiet hum of the evening. And you can't help but wonder if you set aside the labels, the expectations, the image you try to keep polished for others, who would you be walking through that gate? Some teachings are about letting go of titles. Others are about taking full responsibility for what happens under your watch, even when it means doing something so strange, so unexpected, that it leaves everyone else speechless. The kitchen is alive with the warm, steady clatter of evening preparations. Steam curls upward from great iron pots. Knives knock softly against wooden boards. The air is thick with the scent of simmering vegetables, miso, and freshly steamed rice. At the center of it all stands the head cook, a tall, broad-shouldered monk named Ryoten. His sleeves are rolled up, revealing forearms strong from years of kneading dough and lifting heavy pots. His expression is calm-focused, a man who treats cooking as meditation. Tonight, the abbot will dine with guests, and Ryoten has prepared a clear vegetable soup, the kind where every ingredient must be perfectly balanced. He tastes it one last time, nods with satisfaction, and ladles it into a lacquered bowl. A younger monk takes the tray and walks toward the abbot's room. The sliding door opens. A bow. The soup is set down before the abbot. But then, a pause. The abbot leans closer to the bowl, his brow furrowing. Floating there just under the surface is the unmistakable shape of a small, lifeless lizard. The younger monk freezes. The abbot looks up. "Bring me the cook," he says. Within moments, Ryoten is kneeling in the abbot's quarters. He sees the lizard in the bowl, its pale belly facing upward, legs curled. The younger monk shifts nervously, waiting for excuses or apologies. Instead, Ryoten reaches for the bowl, lifts it to his lips, and drinks the soup, lizard and all. He sets the empty bowl down, wipes his mouth and bows. There he says calmly, "It will not trouble anyone now." Silence. The abbot studies him for a long moment, then chuckles softly. "You take responsibility completely," he says. "That is good." And with that, he gestures for more soup to be brought, this time without the unexpected garnish. Most of us, when caught in a mistake, scramble to explain, to shift blame, to soften the edges of our fault. But Ryoten's choice was different. He didn't defend himself. He didn't waste a moment on embarrassment. He simply acted to resolve the problem fully and immediately. If this story made you think about how you handle mistakes, tell me in the comments. Would you have done what Ryoten did? The story of eating the lizard will be told in the temple for years, not as a tale about carelessness, but about the courage to accept responsibility without hesitation. In Zen, this is more than honor. It's freedom. Because the moment you stop clinging to the need to appear flawless, you can act with clarity. You can respond to what's in front of you without the fog of pride or fear. And sometimes that means doing the uncomfortable thing, the strange thing, the thing that makes everyone else stop talking for a moment and look at you differently. Later in the quiet of the kitchen, Ryoten will wash the last of the evening's dishes. The steam will rise, the night insects will sing outside the open window, and he'll hum softly to himself, utterly untroubled by the day's events. It's not that he doesn't care about mistakes. It's that he refuses to carry them like a second skin. Once dealt with, they're gone, like a bowl washed clean. But what about mistakes you can't simply swallow and be done with? What about the restless thoughts that follow you even into your dreams? In our next story, a young monk learns that Zen practice doesn't end when the eyes close. It follows you all the way into sleep. The temple bell rings once deep and resonant, fading into the evening air like a stone sinking into water. Lanterns glow faintly along the covered walkway. Beyond them, the sky is shifting from indigo to black, and the first stars are pricking through. In the meditation hall, rows of monks sit in stillness, their breath slow, faces serene. All except one. You notice him right away, a young monk named Joran. His back is straight, his eyes are closed, but his brow is furrowed. His hands twitch slightly in his lap. There's tension in his jaw, as if he's fighting some invisible battle behind his eyelids. When the bell finally signals the end of the sitting, Joran bows with the others but lingers after the hall empties. His teacher, Master Daichi, approaches quietly. "Why do you look as though you've been wrestling a wild animal?" Daichi asks. Joran hesitates, then sighs. "I try all day to keep my mind clear, Master. But at night, in my dreams, it's chaos. I argue, I fear, I chase and run. How can I claim to practice Zen if I lose it the moment I fall asleep?" Daichi nods as if this is neither surprising nor new. "Then practice while sleeping," he says simply. Joran blinks, but how Daichi smiles. "The same way you practice while awake, by noticing. Begin each night with the intention to observe your dreams. When you wake, reflect on what happened, not to judge, but to understand. If you can see through the dream while dreaming, you will begin to see through waking life as well." That night, Joran lies in his small sleeping chamber, the sound of rain tapping lightly against the roof. He breathes slowly, sets his intention, and drifts into the dark. The dream begins with him walking down a crowded street, people rushing past in every direction. The noise is deafening shouts, bells, the clatter of carts. Then, without knowing why, he remembers, "I am dreaming." The chaos slows, as if the world has taken a breath with him. He watches the faces passing by, curious, unafraid. And in that quiet awareness, the dream fades into a calm expanse of light. When he wakes, the rain has stopped. The world outside is damp and fresh, the smell of wet earth seeping in through the paper screen. For the first time, Joran feels that his practice has followed him through the night and back into the morning. It's easy to think mindfulness is something we do only in practice time during meditation, during yoga, during the quiet moments we set aside. But what if you could carry it into your most unguarded hours? If you've ever had a dream that felt like a lesson, share it in the comments. What did it teach you when you woke? Weeks pass. Joran continues his nighttime practice. At first, it's clumsy. He wakes often forgetting his intention. But gradually, the awareness begins to thread through both his waking and dreaming hours. His mind grows quieter, his reactions softer. Master Daichi notices. "Good," he says. "Now you see that the mind is not divided between day and night. It is the same mind. If you can meet it with awareness in one, you can meet it in both. One evening, as the monks gather for the final meditation of the day, Joran sits down on his cushion. The air smells faintly of incense, the flicker of candlelight dancing on the wooden beams. His breath is steady, and somewhere deep inside he knows that whether his eyes are open or closed, whether the world is a waking street or a dream street, he is simply here. But awareness isn't only about watching the mind, it's also about understanding your place in the web of all things. In our next story, a wealthy merchant learns how a single act can ripple outward far beyond what he can see. The day is warm, the kind of warmth that makes the air shimmer slightly above the stone road. In the distance, the sea glitters like scattered coins, waves folding over themselves with a lazy rhythm. Along the shore, a man walks his silk robes, catching the sunlight, his sandals crunching softly on the sand. His name is Koji, a merchant so wealthy his caravans of goods are known from one coast to the other. Today, however, his steps are heavier than usual. He has come to see Master Ryokan, a monk, who lives in a small hut just beyond the fishing village. Koji bows respectfully at the door. Master, I have everything a man could want. Houses, land, ships, and yet my heart is restless. I give to the temple, to the poor, to the village, but still there is no peace. Tell me, what am I missing? Ryokan smiles faintly and motions for him to follow. They walk together down to a still pond, its surface reflecting the sky like a mirror. The only sound is the faint buzzing of summer insects. The master picks up a small smooth stone and places it in Koji's hand. Throw it in, he says. Koji tosses it gently. Circles ripple outward from the point of impact, reaching the edges of the pond before fading. Now Ryokan says, throw another bigger, this time. Koji picks up a heavier stone and drops it in. The ripples are larger, faster, stronger, but still they spread until they touch every edge of the pond. Ryokan looks at him. This is giving. It doesn't matter if the stone is small or large, the ripples will touch the whole pond. But if you throw carelessly, the splash will muddy the water. Give not in proportion to your wealth, but in proportion to your heart. Koji stands quietly watching the last circles fade. For years he had thought that more gold meant more virtue. But the pond doesn't measure coins, it measures intention. It's tempting to think that the value of what we give is in its size or cost. But what if the real measure is the clarity it leaves behind in us and in others? If you've ever seen a small act ripple farther than expected, share it in the comments. I'd love to know what your stone in the pond has been. Koji looks down at the water. So, I should give less? Ryokan shakes his head. Give what is exact for the moment. A single cup of water can save a man dying of thirst. A barrel poured into a flood means nothing. See the need. Meet it exactly. No more, no less. They walk back to the hut in silence. The air smells faintly of salt, the sound of gulls wheeling overhead. At the doorway, Koji bows deeply. That night, he begins to give differently. Not in grand gestures designed to impress, but in quiet acts that fit the moment perfectly. And slowly, almost without noticing the restlessness that had followed him for years, begins to loosen its grip. The sea continues its rhythm in the distance, endless ripples meeting endless shore. But sometimes, the lesson we need isn't about giving at all, it's about seeing. And no amount of words or theories can replace the shock of direct experience, especially when it's handed to you in the form of a glowing iron poker. The winter wind is sharp tonight, slipping through every crack in the wooden walls. In the meditation hall, a small brazier glows faintly, its coals breathing out a steady warmth that barely reaches the edges of the room. A young monk named Renji sits cross-legged before his teacher, Master Harada. They have been speaking for hours about the nature of enlightenment, words flowing like a river, sometimes clear, sometimes swirling with currents Renji can't quite follow. Finally, Renji leans forward. "Master," he says, "I understand the teachings. I've read the sutras, I've listened to your lectures, but still, I do not see." Harada's eyes narrow slightly. "You understand nothing," he says. Renji's face flushes. "But I..." Before he can finish, Harada rises, walks to the brazier and picks up the iron poker resting in the coals. Its tip glows an angry orange. Without a word, he steps toward Renji and brings the heated metal within inches of the young monk's face. Renji jerks back instinctively, his heart pounding. The air between them feels electric, the smell of hot metal sharp in his nose. Harada holds the poker steady. In this moment, do you understand the heat or do you feel it? Renji swallows hard. "I feel it." Harada nods, returning the poker to the brazier. That is the difference. Knowledge you keep in your head. Realization seizes your whole body before the mind has time to think. It's easy to stay in the comfort of ideas where things are tidy and safe. But sometimes, the truth has to burn close enough that you can't ignore it. If this story reminded you of a moment when an idea became real for you, share it in the comments. What was your fire poker moment? Renji bows deeply. For the rest of the night, he says nothing. But as he sits in meditation, he notices a faint trembling in his hands, a physical memory of that heat, closer than any thought could bring him. Weeks later, Harada will ask him about the sutras again. Renji will smile faintly. "I still read them," he says, "but now I'm listening for the heat between the lines." The snow outside thickens, muffling the sound of the wind. In the brazier, the coals shift and sigh, glowing softly in the dim room. And yet, not all lessons arrive with heat or shock. Some slip in gently disguised as the simplest of choices, like the decision to walk through a gate you've been circling for years. The afternoon sun is warm on your shoulders as you walk along a narrow dirt road. The scent of blooming wisteria drifts over the walls from a nearby garden, its purple blossoms swaying gently in the breeze. Ahead you see a wide wooden gate. It's tall, weathered and bound with heavy iron hinges. On one side of the road, it marks the entrance to a sprawling monastery. On the other side, a narrow footpath winds down toward the village. A man stands in front of the gate, pacing back and forth. His clothes are travel-worn, his sandals coated with dust. Every so often he pauses to peer through the slats, sighs heavily, then resumes pacing. You approach quietly, and he notices you. "I've been walking around this monastery for weeks," he says, frustration in his voice. "I can hear chanting inside. I can smell the food from their kitchen. I came here to learn, but I can't find a way in." You glance at the gate. It's not locked. In fact, it's slightly ajar. Just then, an old monk appears from within. He carries a broom in one hand, a bundle of firewood in the other. He looks at the traveler and smiles. "You've been circling all this time," the monk says, "but you never tried to push." The traveler frowns. "I thought a gate like this must be locked." The old monk sets down his bundle. Many people live their lives circling gates that are already open. They assume they need permission or the right key or more preparation. But most of the time, all they need is the courage to walk in. Think about the gates in your own life. The opportunities you've been circling, waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect confidence, the perfect sign. If you can think of one gate you're ready to step through, share it in the comments. Naming it might just be the first step inside. The traveler steps forward, lays his hand on the wood, and pushes. The gate swings open effortlessly, revealing a sunlit courtyard where monks move about their work. The chanting grows clearer. The smell of fresh rice fills the air. The old monk gestures for him to enter. "The path is yours now," he says. "But remember, every gate you pass through is only the beginning of another road." The traveler bows deeply, then walks inside. As you watch, you realize how often the walls in our lives are real, but the gates are imagined. Sometimes, all it takes is a hand on the wood, a gentle push, and the willingness to step forward without waiting for someone else to invite you. The wind shifts, carrying the sound of the chanting across the road. The gate, now fully open, creaks softly as it moves in the breeze. But once you are inside, the journey doesn't always go as expected. Sometimes the path turns in ways that test not just your courage, but your ability to let go even of the very things you once longed for. The rain has been falling since dawn, steady and unhurried. It patters softly on the tiled roof, trickles down the bamboo gutters, and gathers in small silver pools along the stone path. Inside the abbot's study, the air is warm and fragrant, with the scent of roasted barley tea. A young monk named Sogen kneels by a low table, carefully setting out 2 cups. Each one is handmade porcelain, glazed in a pale blue that reminds you of morning mist. The abbot enters his robe, trailing slightly damp at the hem. He sits, nods a greeting, and Sogen pours the tea. For a while they sip in silence, the sound of the rain filling the space between them. When the tea is gone, Sogen rises to clear the cups. But as he reaches for one, his sleeve catches the edge. The cup tips, falls to the wooden floor, and shatters into 3 neat pieces. Sogen freezes. His chest tightens. "Master, I'm so sorry," he blurts out. "This cup was your favorite." The abbot looks down at the fragments for a long moment. Then he smiles faintly. The cup was already broken. Sogen blinks. But I just broke it. No, the abbot says gently. From the moment it was made, its fate was to break one day. Today was simply the day it returned to that truth. Knowing this, we can enjoy things fully while we have them, without clinging when they change. How often do we act as if the things we love will last forever? The friendships, the places, the objects that feel like part of our identity. What if we could hold them with gratitude, knowing they were always in some sense already passing? If this story makes you think of something or someone you've been afraid to lose, share it in the comments. Sometimes speaking it aloud is the first step toward holding it more lightly. Sogen kneels and picks up the pieces. The rain outside has softened to a fine mist, the kind that blurs the edges of everything. As he sets the fragments on the table, he realizes that the loss feels lighter now. Not because the cup mattered less, but because he sees its life in full, from creation to breaking. Later, the abbot will repair the cup using the art of kintsugi, filling the cracks with powdered gold. When it returns to the table, weeks later, its lines will shine, not as scars to be hidden, but as part of its story. The lesson stays with Sogen. Everything you hold is already changing. Knowing this doesn't make life emptier, it makes it more vivid. Outside, the rain stops completely. The courtyard glistens, and somewhere in the distance, a bird begins to sing. But even when we understand impermanence, it's not always easy to act with clarity in the moment. Sometimes, the choice before us is so clouded with fear or doubt that we can't see the way forward until someone points it out with the simplest of questions. The river is calm this morning, its surface a pale mirror for the mist drifting above it. The current is slow here, winding lazily past willow trees whose branches trail in the water. On the bank stands a fisherman named Haru, his small wooden boat resting half in half out of the shallows. He's been here since before sunrise, but instead of casting his net, he just stares at the water. An older man appears along the path, Master Enso, walking with the ease of someone who knows every bend of this river. He pauses beside Haru. "Why haven't you gone out?" Haru shrugs. "The current feels uncertain today. I'm not sure if I should head upstream or drift down. If I choose wrong, I'll waste the day." Enso looks at the boat, then at Haru. "And if you don't choose at all?" Haru frowns. "Then I'll stay here. At least I won't waste my energy." Enso smiles faintly. "You'll still lose the day, just without the fish." He steps closer, rests a hand on the boat's bow. "Point your boat. The river will teach you what you need to know. You can always change course, but you can't steer from the shore. How many choices have you delayed, waiting for certainty that never came? How many mornings have slipped past while you stood in the shallows? If this story makes you think of a decision you've been postponing, share it in the comments. Sometimes naming the choice is the first move toward making it. Haru looks at the water again. The mist is thinning now, revealing gentle ripples moving downstream. He pushes the boat fully into the river, steps in and lets the current take him. At first, the flow is slower than he expected. Then, around a bend, it quickens, carrying him past a cluster of rocks where small silver fish dart in the sunlit shallows. He casts his net, the rope sliding smoothly through his hands. By midday, the boat is heavy with his catch. When he returns to the bank, Enso is there, leaning on his staff. Haru bows deeply. "You were right, Master." Enso shakes his head. The river was right. It's always moving. So must you. The sound of the current follows you as you walk away. A reminder that stillness has its place, but when it's time to move, even the smallest push can change the whole course of the day. And as the river flows on, so does the path. We've traveled through stories of silence and risk, of letting go and stepping forward. But before we close tonight's journey, there is one last scene, an ending that is less a goodbye than a gentle turning toward whatever comes next. The evening sky is brushed with fading gold, the kind that melts slowly into soft violet. A thin breeze moves through the temple garden, carrying the scent of pine and the faint sweetness of late-blooming plum blossoms. Inside a small room near the back of the monastery, a low table is set for two. A kettle rests on the brazier, steam curling upward in slow, elegant ribbons. Across from the empty cushion sits Master Horin, his back straight, hands folded in his lap. His oldest disciple Tenzu enters quietly. There's something different about his movements tonight. Slower, more deliberate. He sits, bows deeply, and for a long moment, neither man speaks. Finally, Horin breaks the silence. "You've decided." Tenzu nods. "I will leave at dawn. It's time for me to walk my own path." The master's face remains serene, but his eyes soften. Without a word, he reaches for the kettle and begins to pour. The sound of the tea filling the cups is steady, unhurried. The steam rises between them like a veil. Horin slides one cup toward Tenzu. "This will be our last cup together for some time," the master says. "Drink it as if it were your first." Tenzu cradles the cup in both hands, feeling its warmth seep into his skin. The tea is simple, fragrant, perfectly brewed, no more, no less. They drink in silence. Outside, the wind brushes against the shoji screens, and somewhere in the garden, a night bird calls. Think about the last time you shared something with someone knowing it would be the last for a while. A conversation, a meal, a moment that you wanted to stretch just a little longer. If you've ever had a last cup of tea moment, share it in the comments. Sometimes remembering them keeps the warmth alive. When the cups are empty, Horin sets his down gently. Remember, he says, the path is not out there somewhere. It's under your feet, wherever you stand. If you cannot find it where you are, you will not find it by moving. Tenzu bows again. "I will remember." The master rises, slides open the door, and the cool night air drifts in. They step outside together, walking slowly through the garden toward the gate. The moonlight catches on the smooth stones, making them shine faintly in the dark. At the gate, Tenzu turns. The master is still watching him. hands folded loosely, expression calm. Thank you, Tenzu says. Horin simply nods. Go well. You watch as Tenzu's figure grows smaller along the path until he disappears into the silver-blue haze of the night. The gate closes softly behind him. The garden is quiet again. The kettle inside has gone still, and yet the warmth of that last cup seems to linger in the air, as if it has seeped into the walls, the stones, the very soil. We've traveled together through tales of silence, risk, devotion, and letting go. These stories are not instructions to be followed, but invitations. Small openings in the walls we build around our lives. If one of them has stayed with you tonight, let it rest there. You don't need to carry them all. Even a single thought, a single image can ripple outward for years. The night deepens. The stars are clear now, scattered across the sky like grains of white sand. The wind quiets, and you, somewhere between waking and sleep, can feel the stillness settling in gentle, steady, like a breath that takes its time. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams.